Welcome to France 2022, the campaign. It is indeed our daily show covering the presidential election here in France. 18 days to go before round one. And today a former socialist president is inching to make a comeback after the election. The communist contender says he loves all the voters, and the conservative hopeful flexes her muscles. Here's the recap of the day with Shirley Sitbon.
Socialist candidate Anne Hidalgo gets center stage after a long-awaited official backing from François Hollande, the former socialist president. But it seems Hollande has not stepped up for Hidalgo alone, but to plan out how he can help rebuild the left after her likely defeat.
Chers amis, quoi qu'il advienne, le 10 et 24 avril prochain, une initiative devra être prise au lendemain du scrutin et avant les élections législatives, pour reconstruire la gauche de responsabilité.
Communist Fabien Roussel has reached out to people beyond the left, far beyond, including to working-class voters who ditched his party years ago for Marine Le Pen.
Je m'adresse à tous les Français. Et il y en a tellement qui ont été déçus, qui ont voté un coup à gauche, un coup à droite et qui ne s'y retrouvent plus. Moi, je veux reconstruire la France avec tout le monde. Mais c'est une différence de taille avec les autres forces de gauche. Sans hégémonisme, sans sectarisme.
Éric Zemmour got slapped with complaints from 6 LGBT groups, all the while he presented his 400-measure program to, quote, save the nation.
La France est à la croisée des chemins de sa propre histoire. Économiquement, culturellement, démographiquement, notre pays pourrait s'effacer progressivement de la grande marche du monde. Mon programme est là pour conjurer cette fatalité.
Zemmour's chances at winning may be waning, but some conservatives still believe he can pull through. The same forum wasn't as inspired by right-wing candidate Valérie Pécresse. She pulled through her speech anyway.
Quand on a tenu 9 mois face à la rue, face aux étudiants gauchistes et qu'on a fait 70 évacuations de fac, on n'a pas peur de venir débattre.
Nicolas Dupont-Aignan got unexpected backing from Brigitte Bardot, now an animals rights activist. He tried to push his luck with France's many pet owners. That's all from today's campaign trail until we meet again.
OK, well, let's have a look and see how the candidates are doing in the polls. Mark, what's the first round looking like according to this new IFOP poll?
It's still looking good for Emmanuel Macron. He's ahead of the pack, 28%. It's also looking better and better for the far-right candidate, Marine Le Pen. For the first time, she reaches the 20% threshold. So she's 6 percentage points in front of the far-left leader, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, 14%, and of her rival on the far right, Éric Zemmour, 12%. The conservative hopeful Valérie Pécresse is only at 11%.
OK, that's round one. What would a second round look like?
The Macron-Le Pen rematch of 2017. This time around, Emmanuel Macron would win with 54.5% of the votes, 45.5% for Marine Le Pen. This is much tighter than it was in 2017. Macron won 64 versus 36. So the race is tightening, and this is probably why Emmanuel Macron has been telling his lieutenants to wake up and warn them that this race is not going to be a cakewalk.
OK, so far from being a foregone conclusion. Now, the war in Ukraine is, of course, on everybody's mind. And it's also caused a bit of wrangling, hasn't it, between oil companies and the green candidates?
Yes, more than wrangling, actual fighting. Yannick Jadot, the green candidate, is accusing the oil giant Total Energy of being an accomplice to Russian war crimes committed in Ukraine. This did not go down well with the company's boss. Take a listen.
J'accuse l'entreprise Total Energy d'être complice des crimes de guerre qui sont perpétrés en Ukraine, en ayant parfaitement connaissance des atrocités qui sont menées en Ukraine, en travaillant avec des groupes économiques proches du pouvoir de Poutine.
Je suis un patron en colère quand M. Jadot accuse les 100 000 salariés total.
De complicité de crimes de guerre.
C'est gravissime, c'est une insulte. Est-ce que vous pensez que nous ne sommes pas des êtres humains et que nous ne réfléchissons pas tous les jours?
Okay, so the war in Ukraine very much on everybody's minds, including on the minds of people taking part in the election. So too is the brutal killing of Ivan Colonna, a Corsican nationalist accused of killing a top French official on the island back in 1998. This seems to have taken Macron's government by surprise, Mark. And Colonna was, of course, murdered by an inmate in a prison. He was a central figure, a bit of a cult figure, wasn't he, in Corsica?
Yes, indeed. This unrest on the Mediterranean island has caused really an uproar and has prompted the French government for the first time ever to propose a quote-unquote autonomy for Corsica in a bid to quell the protest ahead of April's election, bringing back to the surface decades of tumultuous ties between the French state and Napoleon's birthplace. Maya Anaïs yet again explains why.
Overcome the major crisis in Corsica days before the election. For the first time ever, the French state has dropped the A word, stopping short of granting independence to the island.
La volonté de la République, elle est double. C'est la Corse dans la République. Il ne s'agit en aucun cas d'indépendance, mais par contre d'autonomie qu'on a donnée à d'autres collectivités nationales.
A historic announcement in a heavily centralized country that left many Corsicans skeptical.
Ce sont des promesses électorales.
Je ne peux pas être satisfait d'une autonomie vague, de la non-reconnaissance de notre peuple.
Corsica, a small mountainous island of 300,000 people, has been French since the 18th century. Separatist violence has rocked the birthplace of Napoleon Bonaparte until 2014, when armed groups have decided to advance their cause by peaceful means. The issue of reforming the island's status has been on ice since 2018, despite nationalists winning local elections and Corsicans calling for better recognition of their identity, notably their language. Autonomy talks are to begin in April and be completed by the end of the year. It will be the next president's task to set the tone of the dialogue.
Il faut aujourd'hui ouvrir.
Today we must begin a new era in the relationship between Corsica and the French state.
La Corse et l'État français.
We have proposed to give Corsica the status known as Article 74, which applies to French Polynesia and allows for more autonomy.
Davantage d'autonomie.
This status could give Corsica improved legislative powers, allowing the region, one of the poorest in France, to take charge of taxation, local economic development and housing issues.
Okay, so when it comes to the issue of autonomy for Corsica, Mark, where do the candidates stand?
Well, it's interesting because the issue came to the fore very late in the campaign. So in a nutshell, you have the no camp with the communist Fabien Roussel and the far right with both Le Pen and Zemmour absolutely opposed to granting such an autonomy. All the other main candidates are in favor of the autonomy. However, everything will depend on what that autonomy will exactly mean. We'll probably have an answer only after the presidential and legislative elections.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark. We've got a new section coming up now. It's called the French Presidential Election for Dummies. Every week we're going to be focusing on some of the particularities and the peculiarities of the French election, which at times might raise some eyebrows abroad. For that, welcome to Florence Villeminot.
Good evening.
Florence, today the spotlight will be on the presidency itself. It's quite unique. It's a very powerful institution here in France. Experts say it's the most powerful office in the democratic world. So what powers do presidents here actually have?
Well, the French president wields a tremendous amount of power compared to other leaders, say, in the UK and Germany, and even the president of the United States. Keep in mind, we're talking about the scale of France here. Once a president is elected, they wear several caps. First of all, a French president is head of state, so that means that the French president is in charge of ensuring that the French Constitution is upheld, that institutions work, and that the country's territorial integrity is respected. The French president is also head of the executive branch, and so that means that the French president appoints the prime minister. French prime ministers have less power than they do in other democracies. They're essentially in charge of defending the government's policies in front of the parliament. But It's the president who calls the shots, and it's the French president who essentially sets the agenda when it comes to the nation's policy. Now, the French president has a lot of power with respect to the French parliament. It can, if lawmakers get in the way, it can actually dissolve parliament or bypass parliament by organizing a popular referendum. Now, we saw that list of job requirements for the French presidency earlier. The French president is also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces and thus has the power to deploy troops abroad and also order the use of nuclear force. So those are the tremendous powers that the president has. And on top of everything, the French president has an ultimate trump card, and that is Article 16 of the Constitution, which allows the president to assume full executive control if the nation is under serious threat. And this has only been used once so far, and it was in 1961 during the Algiers Putsch.
Okay, so a strong leader in charge of everything is what the president's job roughly sounds like. It would be tempting to say that all of that sounds like it sort of harks back to the years of monarchy, but perhaps it doesn't go back that far, does it?
It would be tempting to think that, but it actually is due to more recent history. A strong president is a key feature of what's called the Fifth Republic, which was ushered in by Charles de Gaulle with the Constitution of 1958. Now, the Fifth Republic followed the Fourth Republic, which was put in place following World War II and the Nazi occupation. And the Fourth Republic was a parliamentary republic, so that meant the parliament had more power, but it was marked by chronic government instability and parliamentary paralysis, all this with the backdrop of the Algerian War. And so the idea emerged that France needed a stronger leader to really call the shots, to reestablish order and stability. And so that's where Charles de Gaulle came in with this Fifth Republic. He was the architect of the Fifth Republic. He really came up with that list of job requirements. But there were already some critics at the time. Let's actually listen to Charles de Gaulle in 1958. He was talking to critics who were afraid that this strong president could be kind of a slippery slope towards authoritarianism.
Est-ce que j'ai jamais attenté aux libertés publiques fondamentales? Je les ai rétablies. Pourquoi voulez-vous qu'à 67 ans, je commence une carrière de dictateur?
Florence, this is one of the most famous quotes from Charles de Gaulle. Some of the harshest critics, however, of the presidency ushered in by de Gaulle have been presidents themselves.
That's right. François Mitterrand, he wrote a pamphlet that was, a book that was called, he talked about how the French presidency was a permanent coup d'etat. So he said this when he was in the opposition, less so when he was president for 14 years. Now, more recently, François Hollande, he said that he wanted to bring things back down to ground and be a normal president. This was what he campaigned on in 2012. Let's listen to him during a debate against his rival in the second round. That was Nicolas Sarkozy, so the incumbent at the time. And this is during the debate. Take a listen.
François Hollande, quel président comptez-vous être?
Un président qui, d'abord, respecte les Français, qui les considère. Un président qui ne veut pas être président de tout, chef de tout, et en définitive responsable de rien. J'avais évoqué une présidence normale. Rien n'est normal quand on est président de la République, puisque les conditions sont exceptionnelles.
So François Hollande there saying that he wants to be a normal president, but that it's an exceptional role. And every time there's a presidential election, this debate comes up. Should we reform the presidency here in France? Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the candidate for the far-left France Insoumise, has been calling for a sixth republic, which would take away some of the powers of the president, give more power to the parliament. So far, that doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. Perhaps it will. In the meantime, though, people still liken the French president to a modern-day monarch, which is pretty funny for a country that fought so hard to get rid of its king.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Florence Villemino. Let's finish on a lighter note. Even for professional politicians, becoming president can be quite a steep learning curve, Mark.
Yes, and absolutely when it comes to protocol, it can be quite tricky. For example, if you've never walked on the red carpet during an official visit, well, this is what happened to François Hollande. We're just talking about him. A couple of days after he was elected, he paid his first visit to Germany, and German Chancellor Angela Merkel was there. Merkel had already been in power for 7 years, and she provided Hollande with an on-the-spot tutorial. Here, François moved to the left. Okay, continue walking. Continue. Now you're going to stop, turn around, and salute the soldier. That's it. François. Let's go. Let's move on. Okay, you're doing great. Continue. And now, let's shake hands. You made it. Welcome to the club.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for that, Mark Perriman. We'll see you tomorrow. That's it for today's edition of The Campaign. Join us tomorrow, 8:15 p.m. Paris time.